All right, I think I'm recording now, so let's see how this works. And okay, so we're building on what we did in chapter 11. Chapter 11, we talked about the costs, and now we're going to add in revenue and profit in this one. So the chapter starts talking about the four main market structures, which are basically on the kind of the level of competition you have and the type of business. So this was a little summary that they had in the book. I'm trying to get my little. There we go. Oops. Hold on. Everything's working different. Um, okay, so perfect competition is what we start with, and that's what we're talking about in this chapter. So in that form, you've got lots and lots of buyers and sellers, and the key here is that they are selling identical products. It's really easy to enter or exit the market, and the examples, and there's not a lot of true examples of this, but wheat or farming or something is the same. Is so. Let's picture like I'm growing wheat and I'm selling it to like Kellogg's or something like that, like a big thing. They don't care if the wheat came from farmer A or farmer B. It's all the same. So um, if you can tell which one it came from, then it's not perfect competition. So then that goes on to the next one. Monopolistic competition is actually what a lot of firms fall under. And they're similar, but they're differentiated products. So again, it's easy to enter and exit the market. There's lots and lots of firms, but like clothing stores or restaurants, you might say, well, this restaurant's almost the same thing. But if they've got their name on it, it's different. You can tell whether you're walking into A or B, then it's differentiated. Um, and for each of these, we'll talk about what strategies become important for them for maximizing their profit. An oligopoly is there's only a couple big firms, and so it could be identical or differentiated, but that's kind of what designates this guy. So uh, um, soda or computer manufacturers or autos, those types of things. They're generally companies that have like really, really high fixed cost, airlines, that kind of stuff. And so there's like a few big competitors kind of dominating the market. That's an oligopoly, and that will change their decision making. And then a monopoly is where you've got one firm providing something, and it's very unique. So it might be that they have uh, um, a copyright on something or patent on something, or sometimes it's utilities where there's just like one big company providing it because it's so expensive it's not feasible to have more than one company. So we'll do monopolistic competition here next week, and then we're doing these two the following week. So for the rest of this one, we're talking about just perfect competition. Okay. So as we said in here, many buyers and sellers, identical products is really important, and there's no barriers to firms entering or leaving the market. So there's not like a patent or regulation or something like that. Anybody can enter this market if they want to. Because of that, these guys are price takers, so they are unable to affect the market price. You've got a whole bunch of people, and they're all really small, and they're selling identical products. So neither one can kind of dictate the market price. So it's relatively rare, but they have to just take whatever the market price is. And if they sell anything more, if they try to charge anything more than that, they're not going to sell anything. So again, if we go back to the farmers selling wheat to Kellogg's, if everybody's selling wheat for $6 a bushel and I decide to charge $6.50, I'm not going to sell anything at all. Nobody's going to buy mine at $6.50 when they can buy as much as they want for $6. So you have no control over the price. So that's what their demand curve looks like this. So if the market price is $7, whether they sell a little or a lot, because we said in when we looked at a demand curve, if you want to sell more, you have to drop your price. Well, in this case, dropping their price isn't going to benefit it, and it's not like they're going to sell less or they're going to sell zero if they raise the price. So no matter how much they sell, they're selling it all for $7 a bushel. Now, this is what it looks like just for this one farmer. The demand curve still looks the same. So if this is the total demand, so this is for the whole market here, and that still looks normal. But for an individual farmer, individual, whatever the market price settles on, that's what he's got to sell for. If he tries to raise his price to $8, he won't sell anything. And there's also no incentive for him to lower his price because it's not like he can sell more by lowering his price. So for these guys, their demand curve is just a horizontal line. And this only takes place in perfect competition. So the next thing we talk about in here is profit. So profit is your total revenue minus your total costs. And any firm is trying to maximize their profit. So their total revenue is the price per unit times the number of units they sell. And these guys are selling everything for the same. The first unit they sell, the 10,000, they're all selling for the same price. So revenue for a perfectly competitive firm is really easy because it's just because they're getting the same amount of money for each unit they sell. So for these guys, this is only for perfect competition. The price is the average revenue is the marginal revenue. So in chapter 11, we were doing a lot of marginal versus average versus total and all that kind of stuff. But for these guys, their average revenue is the price and their marginal revenue. So if they're selling everything for $7, every time they sell another unit, they get another $7. So that's, this is only for these guys. And that's why we kind of start with this one because it makes it a little bit easier for us. So average revenue, you would just take their total divided by the quantity, and marginal is the change in the total revenue. But for these guys, since they sell everything for the same price, those are all the same. You with me for now?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Okay. So they go through the example in this book of Farmer Parker. And so if he's selling his wheat or whatever he's selling for $7 a bushel, his total revenue is going to be the quantity times 7. The total cost is somewhere, they give that to us somewhere else. And so the profit is total revenue minus total cost. And so we can see here the best he can do is right here at $13.50. Okay. So selling 7 bushels of wheat is the maximum profit that he can get. That's what we're after here for all of these. And we're going to do all these charts and all of these graphs, but ultimately what we're trying to figure out is how this guy can maximize his profits, or how any firm can. So if we were to expand this chart, here's what we just did. These 3 here, or 4, is what we just did. So his total revenue is the quantity times the price, and his total cost is given. That's kind of what we did in the last chapter. And then profit is total revenue minus total cost. Marginal revenue for this guy, again, this is the change in revenue divided by the change in the quantity. And marginal cost is the change in the total cost divided by the change in the quantity. In this case, the quantity is 1. So every time he sells another unit of wheat, another bushel or whatever, he gets another $7. The marginal cost, we're just looking at how much his cost went up. So when he went from 0 to 1, his cost went up by 4. When he went from 1 to 2, his cost went up by $2.50. When he went from 2 to 3, his cost went up by 2. And so you just keep doing that. So what we find here is that as long as marginal revenue is higher than marginal cost, his profit keeps going up. And so we can see that keep going up, keep going up. When we get to this point, when we get to this 8 bushel, the marginal revenue, so selling that 8th bushel added $7 to his revenue, but it added $9 to his costs. And so that's why you can see his profit going down. Okay. So you want to sell as long as the revenue is higher than cost. But once you get to the point where the cost is higher than the revenue, then you shouldn't produce that. Which means we go up until the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and then we stop. If you don't get to a point where they're exactly the same, like in this one, then you want to keep them where they're closest, but you always want the revenue to be higher. So in this case, we can see right here is where they're closest, and that's what we said. That's his maximum profit right there. And that's the best he can do with this one. So how we calculate marginal and average and all that is the same as it was in the last chapter. So if we were to plot these on a graph, Here's our marginal cost from last week, and it's that kind of check mark shape thing. And then here's marginal revenue, because we said for perfect competition, marginal revenue equals the price, and that also equals the average revenue, but that's not what we're. So if this person is selling something at $4 a bushel, and so this is their marginal revenue curve. It's just a horizontal line at the price. And the profit maximizing point, we're always going to look for where marginal revenue intersects marginal cost. That is the rule. That is going to be the profit maximizing point for any firm. So what we see are the profit maximizing level is where the difference between total revenue and total cost is greatest, or this is the easier way to say it. And this is true for every firm, not just perfect competition. So every firm is going to look for the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. For perfect competition, we know that the price is the marginal revenue. So that means the profit maximizing point is where the marginal cost equals the price. Okay, but really it's where marginal revenue equals the cost, and that's true even for a monopoly with no competition. That is still going to be the profit maximizing point. So for a firm in perfect competition, they don't have to make a decision on the price because the price is kind of given to them, the price takers. They really just have to say, how much should I produce and if I'm going to maximize my profit? And they just look for the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and that's how they're going to maximize their profits. So here's what that looks like on the graph. So here we've graphed the marginal cost and the average total cost, which were from our friends from chapter 11. So the marginal cost is kind of the check mark, and the average total cost is kind of the U. So the way this firm makes their decisions, they say, okay, where does marginal cost intersect marginal revenue? And they intersect right here, okay? So they follow that down, and that's the quantity that they should produce in order to maximize their profit. Now in this case, we can see this is their revenue per unit right here. And then this is their average total cost. So this would be their cost per unit. And so the difference right here is their profit per unit times the number of units they're selling. So this green area here represents their profit. So at this quantity, here's their revenue per unit, here's their cost per unit, because I just went from where I intersected the average total cost curve and followed that over. And that area represents their profit. And that's the you could try a bunch of different things. That's going to be the maximum profit that they can get. So the first thing we always do is see where marginal cost and marginal revenue intersect. That's right here. Then we follow that down and we get the quantity. Now, one of the most common errors is people look at average total cost and they try to find the lowest point on the average total cost curve. But that's not going to maximize your revenue, because you can see if they did that, they would only be selling this many, and then they would have lost this profit right here. So don't look for the lowest point on the average total cost curve. Look for where marginal revenue intersects marginal cost. Okay, this is showing a firm that's really just breaking even. They're not making a profit or a loss. So we find where marginal cost intersects marginal revenue. That's how much they're going to produce. We follow that down. And that is right here at their average total cost curve. So right now, their revenue equals their cost. So they are breaking even. Keep in mind that this is economic break even, not accounting break even. So what that means in English is that this is the best they can do. If you are not breaking even, that means you can do a better use of this resource somewhere else. Because remember, we're talking about explicit and implicit costs from the last chapter and all that. So it doesn't mean they're not making money. Accounting break even means they couldn't be doing better somewhere else, so they might as well kind of stay here. So they're making a profit, accounting profit. So they still have that. Sometimes a firm might do the best they can do and still have a loss. So I find where marginal cost intersects marginal revenue. That's right here. I follow that down, and here's the quantity. That's my profit maximizing quantity. But you can see, here's my revenue, the price equals my revenue, and then here's my cost. So my cost is higher than my revenue, so I have a loss. That's still the best I can do. So in this case, what it actually is loss minimizing. If I were to operate at some other point on here, some other quantity, I would actually lose even more money. So right now, this is the best I can do. That takes us. So here's your little summary, and you can do it in a chart, but you can do it in a graph. If the price is above the average total cost, so first you still find where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and go to that quantity. If at that point the price is greater than average total cost, they're making a profit. If price is exactly at total cost, they're breaking even. And if the price is less, then they're making a loss. So this kind of takes us to what happens if they're doing a loss. So if a firm is operating at a loss, they can either shut down or they can continue producing. In this example, let's say that you come up with a situation and your revenue is $500. Your costs are $600. So you're experiencing a loss of $100. So should you continue operating with a loss of $100 or should you shut down? And most people are like, well, if you're not making money, you should shut down. But it really makes a difference. You have to split those costs into fixed and variable. So let's say your revenue is 500, your fixed costs are 550, and your variable costs are 50. Okay. So it's still a total cost of 600, but I split them up this way. If you were to shut down, your revenue would go away and your variable costs would go away. But by definition, your fixed costs would still be there. You would still have to pay those. So that's like your lease or your mortgage or something that you're stuck with. That would still be there. So you would lose more money by shutting down. So right now, your choices are lose $100 or lose $550, in which case you would keep going. If that same situation, you still had $600 in costs, but your revenue was 500, and let's flip those. Your fixed costs were 50, and your variable costs were 550, still totaling 100. Then if you shut down, your revenue would go away, your variable costs would go away, and you would still just have to cover those fixed costs, in which case you would shut down. So in this one, you'd want to keep going. In this one, you'd want to shut down. And so you can't just say if you're making a loss, you want to shut down, because sometimes that would be even worse. So what we have is the shutdown is based on the variable costs, okay? So if you can at least cover your variable costs, then you keep going. Because then the variable costs are contributing at least something towards your fixed costs. But if you can't even cover your variable costs, then you should shut down. So if your price or your marginal revenue can't even cover your variable costs, then shut down. If it's greater than that, then you're covering your variable costs and you have at least some revenue to put towards those fixed costs to minimize those. So then you keep going. Now, you can't keep going like that indefinitely, but in the long run, you can get out of those fixed costs. That your lease will be up and you can close. But at least in the short run, if you can at least cover your variable costs, you keep going. So that's the shutdown rule. In the short run, the supply curve is going to look like this, where your marginal cost is determining what you supply. So this one is showing you, I put this one in here to show you the shutdown point. So this is your marginal revenue, which is the price, right? And so you're still going to find where marginal revenue intersects marginal cost, which is right here. That's the best you can do. As long as that covers your variable cost. Now this guy's going to have a loss, right? Because at this point, at this quantity, here's his average total cost. So this whole area here represents a loss. But as long as he's covering his variable costs, he should keep going, at least in the short run. If the price were to fall below this anywhere, then you would shut down. So if it can't even cover these variable costs, then it shuts down. So this is our marginal revenue here. We want to extend that out. Okay. Now, that's kind of the short run, and I'm almost done. In the long run, this is what it looks like. Okay. So we said one of the characteristics of this market structure is that there's nothing to prevent somebody from entering or exiting the market. So in this case, we have a situation here where this person, okay, they find where marginal cost and marginal revenue intersect. That's right here. They go down, and so they're going to produce 50,000 eggs, I guess. At this point, here's their revenue, and here is where we intersect the cost. So here's their cost per unit. So they've got a profit. So this green area represents the profit. Now, that's an economic profit. And so people are going to say, hey, that looks pretty good. I think I would like to get into that. Let's say this was, I don't even remember what this market was. It's like cage-free eggs or something. And people are like, hey, there's a lot of money to be made in that. So firms are going to enter the market, okay? So right now, here's supply and demand, and that says the market price is $3 a dozen. But this profit, this economic profit, is going to attract people to this market. There's nothing to stop them from coming in. So what happens is, as people enter the market, the supply is going to increase. And if the supply increases, that brings the price down, okay? Well, her costs haven't changed, but now, and so the marginal and the average total cost are the same, but now we've got this revenue. So now here's marginal cost, here's her new marginal revenue, that intersects right here, and this is the best she can do, which means she settles into this average total cost thing. So as soon as a firm is making a profit, it's going to attract more firms to the market. Now, once she gets to this point where it's an economic break-even, that means there's no incentive for people to enter this market now. And so it'll just kind of settle right there, and that's where it'll stay. The costs are staying the same, and so it'll always settle into this point here at the average total cost. If it's anything above that, there's a profit. It'll attract people in. Once it gets to here, there's no incentive for people to enter that market, so it just kind of settles there. But things can go the other way too. So in this case, the demand dropped, and so the price dropped. And so she was breaking even here. She did have an economic break even at $2, but now the price is $1.75. So here's her new marginal revenue, same marginal cost. They intersect right here. And now she's making a loss because she's not covering her costs. And so what happens then, if people are making a loss, people will eventually leave the market, right? And so if people leave the market, that's what I already did say, now the supply will drop, and that will bring the price back up. And people continue to leave the market until we get to this economic break even again. We get back to break even, and now there's no incentive for people to enter or exit the market. So it's kind of always going to settle into this thing. If they're making a profit, people are going to enter the market. It's going to drop the price. If they have a loss, people are going to leave the market, and that's going to raise the price until the price is going to settle in here at this lowest point in the average total cost curve in the long run. And again, that happens in this market because there's nothing to prevent people from entering or exiting the market.